Good morning, this is Natalie Gilly with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Welcome to the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. So today we're going to talk about some planning topics, and I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and get this started here. So welcome to the BikeMN webinar. Today's webinar topic is an inside look at bicycle and pedestrian planning, guidance for safer streets. Today is June 17th, 2020, and welcome to our webinar. The agenda today will have everyone welcome themselves, and I'll give you a brief overview of the agenda here. We'd like to know who's here and where you're tuning in from. We'll share a little bit about some upcoming webinars that we are also hosting from BikeMN and a few others from the Safe Routes to School Network. And then we have 3 speakers today. So we welcome Dorian, Hannah, and Patrick to the webinar. So if you'd like to go to the chat box, I invite you to put your name and your location. And then the question for today's webinar is, what's your favorite place to bike or walk in Minnesota? And I have put in here that there are bonus points if your favorite place is the Fall Bunyan Trail. I'll share, you know, that is one of my favorite places. I live in Bemidji, so. So today we have quite a few people on the meeting. We welcome Brad from Stillwater, Luke from Jackson, Nick from Minneapolis, Jean from Fergus Falls, Cassie from Rochester, Olmsted County, Hannah from North Minneapolis, Maya from Minneapolis, Sheldon from Seward Neighborhood, Minneapolis, Patrick from Fergus Falls, John from St. Cloud, Ted from Minneapolis, David and Georgiana from Roseville, Kelly from Rochester, Heather from Minneapolis, Josh from Rice County, Bob from Elgin, Mary from Randall, Mark from Bloomington, Dorian from Mahtomedi, Cheryl from Thief River, and Pete from Woodbury today. So welcome to everyone who is joining the webinar, and we're glad you're here with us today. BikeMN hosts a number of different webinars. The one you're on today is our Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar, and upcoming Leadership Network webinars occur on the 3rd Wednesday of the month from 11:30 to 12:30 here on Zoom. In July, we're going to be talking about open streets. In August, education through distance learning. And then in September, virtual events. So we have those coming up. And if you are on our network listserv, you will receive notifications that will give you some more details about how to join those upcoming webinars. We also have some other BikeMN virtual events, and if you want to look in the chat box, we can include a link to those if you'd like to join those as well through BikeMN. Many of you that are on the webinar today might also be part of the Safe Routes to School Network. The Safe Routes to School Network also holds monthly webinars, and in June, tomorrow, they'll be holding a webinar, Speed Zone and Speed Limits. And in July on the 9th, school district transportation. So those are the upcoming topics if you'd like to join and learn a little bit more about Safe Routes to School. Our first speaker today is Dorian Greeley, our Executive Director from the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. And we are going to turn it over to him to talk a little bit about some BikeMN updates. Welcome, Dorian.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I thought I'd just quickly share with you a little bit about BikeMN, where we're at now and where we hope to be in the future. And then I'll give you a quick legislative update. BikeMN started as a bicycling advocacy and education organization in 2008. The focus has always been to make biking and walking, or biking and later walking, easy, safe, and fun for everyone. For the first few years, our unstated strategy could perhaps have been best described as equality, not equity. And thank you for putting up that slide, Natalie. I think that's an excellent description of what we need to be talking about. But in 2016, our strategic plan incorporated the organizational objective, produce equitable outcomes throughout all our work. Since then, our efforts in partnership with many others like you, including the Bike Walk Summit, Bikeable Community Workshops, Adult Learn to Ride, and our Walk Bike Fun curriculum and trainings, prioritize addressing the barriers to biking and walking that many experience in their communities and promoting equity in active transportation plans. But we most certainly recognize that we need and can do more. So last week, we released a statement that, like many other businesses and organizations around the nation, said we recognize that BikeMN has perpetuated racism by not actively and intentionally speaking out against it or by taking stronger actions. We need to do more as a statewide organization to prioritize equity in our work and be overtly anti-racist as we further our mission. We, of course, are limited by what our organization has the capacity to do, but we are committed to reevaluating our policies, programs, and stated commitments through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we welcome your input by phone or info@bikemn.org. Please help us flesh this out a little bit more. But at the end of the day, BikeMN still believes strongly that more people biking and walking will, among other things, help create the engagement that builds communities where everyone feels welcome and places where it is truly safe for everyone to move about freely. I've learned a lot in my 12-year journey with BikeMN, and I'm still learning from all of you and many others every day. I know our staff, our members, and you, our strongest allies in all of this, have a lot of work to do. But I want you to know that BikeMN will be right there alongside you, fighting each day for the more just, equitable, and fair communities that we all deserve. And I don't think we have time to discuss this, but like I said, info@bikemn.org, or feel free to give me a call. My phone number's on the website. And I also wanted to just share with you that you probably all know there's a special session going on right now, but the Minnesota Senate adjourned yesterday until Friday. And the bills that they passed yesterday aren't going to be anything close to what the House is proposing regarding a bonding bill for safe routes to school and a zillion other things, or the public safety law enforcement reforms. So I'm not sure what's going to happen on Friday. Our part, the good news is safe routes to school is in both bonding bills in the House and Senate, if they agree to pass them. So anyway, that's my update. I'll turn it back to you, Natalie. And again, maybe share that slide, or you're going to share the whole thing. But I love the last lower right-hand corner where justice is served in that slide. So I think justice is what we should be shooting for, not just giving somebody a taller ladder.
Thanks, Dorian. And thanks for sharing the slide that has the visual image of how this work may unfold for us and what kind of a role we might play in making some changes that are more equitable. So thank you so much for sharing that, Dorian, and for also giving us some insight on the legislative process that we're all trying to keep up on with changing current events environments and staying up on that. So as you guys know, oftentimes we'll pull in a little bit of a legislative update as applicable during these network webinars. So our next one is in July on the third Wednesday. As we have updates, we'll share them through this network webinar. So thanks, Dorian. Our next speaker today is Hannah Pritchard from MnDOT. And some of you may have heard about the Bicycle Facility Design Manual. But if this is the first time hearing about it, Hannah will do an excellent job here to explain a little bit about the manual and share some information. And as you think about how this might apply to your community. And if you have questions, we'll have a Q&A session after she presents her slides, and you can ask your questions to Hannah. So welcome to the webinar, Hannah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So information's up there on the screen, but my name is Hannah Pritchard. I'm a pedestrian and bicycle engineer in MnDOT's Office of Transit and Active Transportation. So we're based out of the central office down in St. Paul. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but that's who I am. Next slide. So the Bicycle Facility Design Manual was released in February 2020, so right before the calamity all happened, but it is still available and something that we want to make sure that folks are well aware of. So this is a MnDOT manual, so it is designed specifically as a resource for planners and designers that work for the department to implement context-appropriate bike facilities on our right-of-way. However, it is available for free online. And so we anticipate other agencies and advocates for biking may find it to be a useful reference. Next slide. One of the things that was kind of guided our work in developing the update to the bike manual. So the previous manual was released in 2007. So it was a long time coming to get this update done. The statewide bicycle system plan that was done a couple of years ago laid out MnDOT's vision for bicycle transportation, saying that bicycling is safe, comfortable, and convenient for all people. So those three themes kind of resonate throughout the bike manual. As transportation practitioners, safety is always our primary concern, but we also recognize that if biking isn't comfortable or convenient, people aren't going to do it. And MnDOT is interested in increasing the bicycle mode share in the state. Next slide. The bike manual has 7 chapters, and I'm going to breeze through just a couple of them right now because the full presentation on this takes a couple hours. So right from beginning to end, our introduction section has a lot of information about some of the statutes related to biking. It's sort of a list of the statutes, and then refers you to the actual statute for more information. Scoping, planning, and project coordination. So at MnDOT, our projects take many years, 5, 7, 10 years sometimes. And the sooner we can talk about walking and biking in the process, the more successful we are in making sure that those modes are accounted for in our final design. Facility selection, chapter 3. This is probably one of the most important chapters in the manual. This is, and I'll get into the charts that are in there in a minute, but this is really how we are helping our planners and designers decide what type of bike facility is appropriate based on some of the characteristics of the roadway. Chapter 4 is the super nerdy engineering components. So there's all sorts of dimensions of bikes and acceleration characteristics, that kind of thing. Chapter 5 is the bulk of the manual. That's going to be all the different types of bike facilities and a little bit of guidance on best practices for each of those. And then maintenance, our maintenance chapter is unfortunately quite short. If you were hoping that we would have solved the problem of winter maintenance for trails and side paths, you are as disappointed as I am, but we are, hoping to at least make some progress in that direction. And then chapter 7 is kind of everything else. So that's where we've got bridges and interchanges and roundabouts and all that kind of stuff. Next slide. And then next slide. So facility selection. Go one more, Natalie. There we go. So this is something that the bike advocacy and design community has known for a while, that there are different types of bicyclists. They had sort of different names for the categories, but the names that we're using now are interested but concerned, somewhat confident, and highly confident. You'll notice that the highly confident and somewhat confident are a pretty small portion of the biking community. And MnDOT is really interested in designing for kind of the largest portion of people who are interested in biking. So that might be folks with kids that want to go get ice cream or something like that. And so when we talk about the comfort of a facility, we're really talking about like, how does that interested but concerned group feel when they're riding on that facility? And you'll see that the numbers don't all add up to 100%. There is a portion of the population that is not going to get on a bike for whatever reason, and that's fine. This is not some sort of statewide edict that everyone must bike. But those folks aren't really relevant to our design as we look to design for bike facilities. Next slide. So we have two charts. This is the first one. This is for what we call urban conditions, which are not necessarily big city urban. Small town, downtown, Glenwood is a good example of kind of what we mean by that urban condition. And based on either the posted speed or the operating speed, if you have it, of the roadway, and then the average daily traffic, number of vehicles per day, just a really kind of simple chart to say, once the speeds increase and once the traffic volumes increase, that's when we're going to want more separation. So on a low speed, low volume road, we could do a shared roadway or a bike boulevard. But then as the amount of traffic increases, we're going to want more separation. So we'll do that separated bike lane or side path. Next slide. And then this is our rural selection chart. So this is really thinking about, that 2-lane road through the farm fields between small towns. In these contexts, the shoulder is really going to be the best facility that we're going to build. It's really not feasible to do hundreds of miles of side path, along these long stretches, and traffic volumes, vehicle traffic volumes tend to be a lot lower. And so the chart's just a little bit different. So shared roadway in those circumstances where there's almost no vehicle traffic. I mean, some of my favorite biking memories are just riding down the middle of the road on some 2-lane country road somewhere. So that's that kind of situation. And then all the way up to about a 10-foot shoulder to give bicyclists a little bit of room to shy away from vehicle traffic as you get into higher volumes. Next slide. So here's Glenwood, which I know Patrick is familiar with. So this is just an example of a separated bikeway that is on a MnDOT trunk highway. So I try to share this with as many people as I can. So next slide. So the bike manual, chapter 5, is organized from most separated to least separated. So we have the shared use path, which is shared between bicyclists and pedestrians to a facility. Then we have this category called the side path, which I'll get into a little bit more in a minute. But for MnDOT, we aren't usually designing trails through the woods. We're not doing a rails to trails kind of situation. Our shared use paths are almost always parallel to the road in the roadway right of way. That's what we're either through a limited use permit or something we're building ourselves. So that side path category is really, for our agency, where we spend a lot of our time. And separated bike lanes, that category does include buffered bike lanes, the painted buffer, and then paved shoulders, and finally shared roadways. So we have a little bit of information about bike boulevards in there. Not a ton, because again, we're focused on trunk highways. We want our designers to be aware of some of the things that local folks might be asking for. But when we're dealing with freight movement and truck traffic and stuff like that on the trunk highway, that shared roadway is going to be a little bit less common. Oh, other way. There we go. So one of the things that I had to kind of wrap my head around while I was putting this together is just sort of some terminology. And as a bicyclist, I don't really care what you call it, as long as it's something I could ride on. But just to kind of help with what some of these terms mean. So shared use path, that is going to be a two-way facility that is shared between bicyclists and pedestrians typically. So people with strollers, people with dogs on leashes, all that kind of stuff. That's shared use path. Like I mentioned, a lot of shared use paths are adjacent to the roadway. That's going to be a side path. That's sort of a subcategory. But not all of them are. And then we have this term trail, which a lot of people use. I find myself using it. It could be a side path. It's probably a shared use path, but it's not necessarily a shared use path. There are, if you think about, some of the stuff that parks departments do or the DNR, you could have a hiking trail, you could have an equestrian trail, you could have a cross-country skiing trail. So like the term trail is actually really kind of broad. So when I'm talking to MnDOT staff about, our types of facilities, I really try to use the term side path as much as possible. But again, I don't really care what you call it as long as I can ride on it. Next slide. Okay, and then because we don't have a ton of time for this, I wanted to just focus on two types of facilities, and I picked the two that MnDOT works on the most. So like I said, there is information about separated bike lanes. We've also referred to the Federal Highway Administration's separated bike lane guide as one of our resources. And then there's a lot of information about on-street bike lanes, pavement markings, right turn lanes, all that kind of stuff. So side paths, this is what MnDOT is most likely going to be seeing on our roadways. And this graphic over here on the left is just some of those typical dimensions that we would like to see. You know, one of the things that we find is that, you know, folks might get a grant or something for a 10-foot multi-use trail, side path, whatever. And we just want to make sure that we recognize that that 10 feet of asphalt is important, but then we also need a little bit of space between the trail and the back of the right of way, and then as much space as we can get between the trail and the face of the curb or the edge of the road. So that 6 feet in front is really, really good for snow storage. Also just provides a little bit of a physical separation. It's where signs and light poles and all that kind of stuff goes. So that's really, you know, as our cross sections get a little bit constrained, that's sometimes the first place that people look to take some space away. But we have some information in the bike manual about how important that upfront information is. And then on the back side of the side path, so between the trail and the edge of the right of way, we want to have that extra couple of feet as well, because outside of the right of way, we don't really have any control over what private property owners do. And so if someone's going to build a big retaining wall or a fence or something, we want to make sure that folks have a little bit of shy distance between whatever that obstruction is, even if it's not there when we put the trail in, sort of planning for the future. Next slide. And then paved shoulders. So the bulk of the bike facilities that MnDOT builds are paved shoulders. And if you think back to that chart about how wide the shoulder should be under certain circumstances, we also have some really important guidance about rumble strip placement as it relates to that width. So if we build you a 5-foot shoulder, but then we put the rumble strip right down the middle, it's basically made it unrideable. And so we have some guidance on that. And then also this gap. We're trying to get our construction crews and our maintenance crews to put a gap between the rumble strips so that if there's an obstruction on the shoulder, debris or tree branch or whatever, you're able to get out into the travel lane. Next slide. All right, chapter 7. So like I mentioned, this chapter is kind of the potpourri of everything else. Lots of information about bridges and tunnels and interchanges, roundabouts, a lot of guidance on roundabouts there. Some stuff that we are more familiar with at MnDOT and some stuff we are less familiar with. So we haven't really built any speed tables or raised intersections yet, but it's in there. So I'm hopeful that we'll get something like that done someday. Next slide. So these two figures from chapter 7. So this is something that I am pretty excited about. We have some guidance on interchanges. So in these images, the through roadway is the arterial that's like crossing the freeway. So this is, you know, you're coming off the freeway and you're joining the, you know, maybe it's Snelling Avenue or something like that. You're joining the arterial roadway. So you've got a bike lane on your arterial, maybe it's buffered, you've like figured that part out, and then you get to this interchange and it's just a sea of pavement and the bike facility disappears. So in this case, we have a couple of suggestions for, you know, designing sort of a temporary side path, or, you know, just using that green colored pavement to mark the conflict area. There's some pretty epic photos of using that version on the left where it's, you know, 500 feet long, and you kind of get this idea like, oh, okay, this is an uncomfortable place to bike. But just providing our engineers and our designers a little bit more options with respect to how to make sure to carry bike facilities through at our interchanges. Next slide. Okay, and then where to find it. So this is probably in the chat. It's also up here. We have sort of a website dedicated to the bike manual. So there's the PDF of the whole thing. And then there's also chapter by chapter. And that is because we are as we find, typos or errors or something like that, and we found a couple so far, we update chapter by chapter. And then that full PDF is, when you go to the website, that's always the most recent version. You can also Google MnDOT bike manual, and we will be the first hit. That wasn't the case, actually. We had to get our web folks to do a little search engine optimization for us, but we are now the first hit on a Google of the MnDOT bike manual. I think on that website, you'll probably also find my contact information. So always welcome to reach out with any questions or suggestions on what we could include in the next version. That is it for me.
Thanks, Hannah. This laid out a really nice overview of the bicycle facility design manual and gave us an idea of what's going to be in there. And I know there's a lot of details if you go into it and sort through the details of each of the chapters, but thank you so much for presenting all this. I'll pause for a moment here and see if we have any questions in the chat box, or people who are on the phone maybe connecting with the webinar today. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask a question. And we'll pause again at the very end after Patrick presents for overall Q&A. But if anyone has any questions for Hannah, feel free to ask them now. All right, and I know, Dorian, you mentioned that, I don't know if Dorian's still on here or not. If you're still on, is there anything that you guys wanted to ask Dorian before, while he's still on the webinar today? We'll keep you posted in future webinars about things coming down the line legislatively and as some of these other opportunities unfold. So thanks, Hannah. I'm gonna go ahead and transition over to welcome our next speaker. Our next speaker today is Patrick Hollister with Partnership for Health, and he's going to speak about a project that he's been working on in Pelican Rapids. And I know many that are on the phone today. There's quite a few from West Central Minnesota and other parts of the states who may have heard of Patrick speak before or done work with him in West Central Minnesota. In Pelican Rapids, we held a bikeable community workshop almost 1 year ago to date to this webinar today. And I know Hannah was there and I was there, and Patrick as well. Maybe others who are on the webinar today also participated in that. So it was exciting to hear that this project was coming down the line when we met with the community last summer in Pelican Rapids. And I'm excited to welcome Patrick to the webinar today to talk a little bit more about their Pelican Rapids planning project. Welcome, Patrick.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Super. So I'm Patrick Hollister with Partnership for Health. We are the statewide health improvement partnership for Becker, Clay, Otter Tail, and Wilkin counties. We're funded by various sources, primarily the Minnesota Department of Health, but some of what I'm going to talk about today is also sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield Center for Prevention, and we're very grateful to both MDH and Blue Cross for their support, and obviously we're also grateful to BikeMN for hosting this webinar. So I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about what we did last year, and then at the end I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing this year. Last year we did the Pelican Rapids 59 and 108 concept plan, and this year we're doing a bicycle and pedestrian plan for the entire city, both of these obviously being in Pelican Rapids. So next slide. So this was our committee last year for the Pelican Rapids 59 and 108 concept plan process. We recruited various members of the community and city officials to help us put together a concept plan for what the new trunk Highway 59 and Highway 108 in Pelican Rapids should look like. MnDOT District 4 is going to reconstruct highways 59 and 108 in Pelican Rapids in 2024. They are doing that primarily at the request of the city. The city wanted MnDOT to do that because of underground utility failures. They're having too many line breaks, and in order to fix those properly and long-term, you have to dig up the roads. And so Pelican Rapids approached MnDOT back in 2018 and said, could we reconstruct these? And they worked out a deal. Since they did decide to reconstruct them, then I was interested in doing a concept plan for how to make highways 59 and 108 more bicycle and pedestrian friendly when they do reconstruct them in 2024. So next slide. Pelican Rapids has a large immigrant population, primarily because of the existence of a large turkey processing plant in Pelican Rapids. A lot of the immigrants work at that turkey plant. Amongst the immigrants, the two largest groups are Somalis and Latinos. The Latinos are primarily either Mexican or Guatemalan. These aren't the only two groups. There are also Bosnians, there are Southeast Asians, there are various other groups, but by far the two largest groups are Somalis and Latinos. And therefore, when we advertised the meetings last year, the public input meetings for 59 and 108 and for the concept plan process, we endeavored to provide that advertisement in English, Spanish, and Somali. Next slide, please. So obviously 2019 was pre-coronavirus, at least in Minnesota. And so we had a very conventional in-person, face-to-face sort of public input process. We had 3 public meetings. This is a photo from one of them at Lake Region Electric Co-op, which has a very nice meeting room. And that's where a lot of these public meetings tend to happen. In this photo, the mayor is up at the podium, sort of giving the introductory comments before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the concept plan. Next slide, please. So we did a very traditional kind of process at these meetings. We had display boards or storyboards showing elevations and geometry for various scenarios for how we could improve 59 and 108. We gave everybody sticky dots. We asked them, everybody got a limited number of sticky dots. We asked each person to put the sticky dots on the scenarios or the options that they liked the best. And that was very instructional, informative for the concept plan process. Next slide, please. These 3 guys are key stakeholders in the community, amongst many other key stakeholders. The guy on the left is Don Solga. He is the city administrator for Pelican Rapids. The guy in the middle is Andrew Johnson. He owns a store. He and his spouse own a store in Pelican Rapids. They also rent out, as I understand it, canoes and kayaks for people to travel the Pelican River. And then the guy on the right with the camera is Lou from the newspaper. He is the owner of the local newspaper. And, you know, Pelican Rapids is a small town. You're talking about 3,000 people. And so the guy who owns the local newspaper is also very often the guy who goes out with his camera and takes the photos and interviews people and writes the stories himself. So it's a very hands-on operation for Lou. I've known Lou for the last 10 years, and every time that there's been any kind of community effort involving improving the community for bikes and pedestrians, Lou has always been in our corner. He's always been sympathetic and a promoter of our efforts. So he's just been terrific. We couldn't ask for a better person to run our local newspaper. Next slide, please. This is Kate Martinez. She is also another pivotal person in the community. She is the art teacher for Pelican Rapids School District. She is also chair of the Pelican Rapids Park Board. And I had her pose between these 2 storyboards showing sort of qualitatively, visually different images of what other communities look like and what various facilities along the new 59 and 108 could look like. But Kate went above and beyond the call of duty, as you'll be able to see in the next slide, please. So while we were doing the 59 and 108 concept plan process last year, Kate, of her own initiative, went out and took photos of situations that she thought were definitely suboptimal in Pelican Rapids. Dorian gave a very eloquent explanation at the beginning of this webinar about inequality versus equality versus equity versus justice. And that is certainly a strong concern of Kate's. And what Kate did was she went around and took photos of what she regarded, and I agree with her, as inequitable situations or unjust situations in Pelican Rapids regarding bicycle and pedestrian accommodation. In this particular case, this is a Latino family that was attempting to navigate Highway 108 with, as you can see, no bicycle or pedestrian accommodation. They're on a soft shoulder there, and it's wintertime. Now, fortunately, the road was cleared at that moment, but there are people doing this even prior to the roads being cleared. She explained to the family what she was doing. She asked if she could take their photo. They said, sure, you can take our photo. She said, do you mind if you're identifiable in the photo? They said, no, we don't mind if we're identifiable. But after she took the photo, out of concern for their privacy, she took a Sharpie and covered their faces anyway, just to preserve their anonymity. So to this day, I still don't know who they are, but I think it's a very dramatic and powerful photo. Next photo, please. So as Natalie mentioned, we had an opportunity to apply for, we had an opportunity to apply for and receive a bikeable community workshop last spring. And if your community has an opportunity to apply for one of these and you haven't done one yet, please do so. They're great. And what they do is the Minnesota Department of Health coordinates with MnDOT and the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota to provide us guest expertise. And then we get people in the community to participate. Part of the day, it's a full day event. Part of the day is in the classroom, in this case at the Pelican Rapids Public Library. And part of the day is out on bikes. So everybody's supposed to bring their bike. And we have, and as you can see, Hannah's in this photo because Hannah came to help us out. So from left to right here, we have Scott from Minnesota Green Corps, Hannah on behalf of MnDOT, Wayne from West Central Initiative, Natalie from BikeMN, Ellen from Minnesota Department of Health, and Kate, who at the time was both with Minnesota Green Corps and, or no, I believe by that point she was BikeMN staff. So she's there on behalf of BikeMN, although she started as BikeMN's Green Corps member. She's now with the state, but she did a terrific job, as did all of them, for our Bikeable Community Workshop. Okay, next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing this year. During the process of creating the concept plan for Highways 59 and 108 last year, we got a lot of comments at our public meetings saying, this is great that you're asking our input on how to make 59 and 108 more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, but there are other parts of town besides 59 and 108 that we as a community would like to make more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. What about those streets? What about those parts of town? What about those neighborhoods? And so that got me thinking, well, maybe in 2020 we can do a plan for the rest of Pelican Rapids. And sure enough, we got an opportunity to apply for and receive a sponsorship from Blue Cross Blue Shield Center for Prevention. They are sponsoring our bicycle and pedestrian plan process for the rest of Pelican Rapids. And that's what we're doing now in 2020. And so once again, we formed a committee to work on that plan. And next slide. Our first and unfortunately to date only pre-COVID-19 meeting where we could actually get our Pelican Rapids bicycle and pedestrian plan together in a room at City Hall, meet face to face, and actually physically draw on maps with Sharpies was in February, but fortunately we did have them do that. And here they are drawing on aerial photos of Pelican Rapids, indicating where they would like to see additional bike and pedestrian facilities in Pelican Rapids. Now we are continuing that process, including 3 Zoom public input meetings. One of them is on June 23rd and 2 of them are on June 29th. And when you received the email inviting you or reminding you about today's BikeMN webinar, BikeMN was kind enough to include links to those 3 meetings, the actual Zoom links. And Maya is kindly, as we speak, putting those 3 Zoom links in the chat box with this, during this webinar. And I believe that tomorrow, BikeMN is going to send out another email to all of you saying thank you for participating in today's webinar. And that email will also have those 3 Zoom links. So we're hitting you 3 times with those Zoom links. Please join one or more of those Zoom meetings. You're welcome to join all 3 if you want. They're going to be Tuesday, June 23rd at 10 a.m. and Monday, June 29th at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. And basically, we want to have the bike and pedestrian plan wrapped up by the end of calendar year 2020. So we still got half a year left. We got plenty of room for your input. So please join us for one or more of those public input Zoom meetings. Next slide. And so if you want more information about this whole process, you're welcome to contact me, Patrick Hollister. I'm a Clay County employee. So my email address is patrick.hollister@co.clay.mn.us. And my phone number is 218-329-1809. And this is the end of my presentation, but just for fun, type in the chat box where you think I am in that photo that you can see right now. Where am I? And if you want to even get specific about not just the city, but even the neighborhood, that would be fun. But where am I in that photo? Type it into the chat box. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Patrick. This was a great presentation, and it includes so many people that are part of this network that participate statewide in Minnesota in the projects. And thank you, also, for highlighting that Bikeable Community Workshop and the partnership between MnDOT and BikeMN and the Minnesota Department of Health, and how we all come together to help hold some of these community meetings. I'm glad you were able to hold some pre-COVID to get that really valuable public input that I know is informs your process when you do these planning projects. So thank you for sharing all that information. You've asked a chat box question, so even though the chat box is lining up, I'm gonna have to take a look here to see which ones are specifically questions for Patrick, or if these are answers to your poll that you've posed to the group, Patrick. So I'll pause for a moment here and see if we have some guesses or any questions related to your presentation today. Looks like we have a couple of different answers. Not everybody said the same thing, Patrick. I'll give it just another minute or so for others who maybe haven't participated in guessing where Patrick is in the photo to participate. So if you're wanting to participate in the chat box, you can go to the bottom of your screen and click on chat. It'll open up a box on the right-hand corner, right-hand side of your screen, and then you can type into that. You can type for everyone to see, or you can type specifically for the host if you send a private message. So I guess that's just one of the features of Zoom here that if you're not already familiar with, it's a tip and something new you might learn from this webinar today. So.
Patrick, what do we win if we get it right?
My compliments on your geographic savvy.
Okay.
Bonus points if you have ridden one of these bikes as part of this bike share. So I see that
this may be, assuming that my guess was correct, this may be the first bike share system that I personally ever rode. So.
All right, so Patrick, we've got Chicago, San Francisco, Madison, U of M Dinkytown. Those are the answers we have so far from the chat box. Would you like to do the reveal of the correct answer and declare the winner or winner?
Sure. So first of all, if you noticed on the kiosk itself, it says State Street and Van Buren Street. So that's a tip off for some people. But I am in Chicago in that photo. I think 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Patrick, and letting us incorporate a poll or I guess Q&A via the chat box as part of our webinar today. So does anyone have any questions for either Hannah from her presentation about the design manual or Patrick related to Pelican Rapids and some things that they're doing there related to planning? You can type in your question in the chat box, or you could go off of mute and ask your question. Or if you are on the phone, you can also go off of mute to ask your question. So I have a couple of roundtable questions I'd like to close with today. If we don't have any questions, I see one popped up in the chat box. How many areas or neighborhoods are going to be worked on in Pelican Rapids? This would be a question for Patrick.
The short answer is all of them. Pelican Rapids is a pretty small town, and we can cover the whole city pretty easily. We're doing this bicycle and pedestrian plan is sort of a 10,000 foot view in a way. What we're trying to do is identify specific streets where we would like to see additional bike or pedestrian facilities. As Hannah delineated, whether those are side paths, those are sidewalks, those are on-street bike lanes, bike boulevards, sharrows, whatever. We're not going to get into, at least not in 2020, we're not going to get into the real nitty-gritty of how they're designed, what exactly they look like. We don't have the time for that, and we don't have the money for that. But we want to create a sort of a base plan that gives us guidance on where to focus in coming years.
Thanks, Patrick. We have one other question in the chat box here, and this is a question for Hannah. Hannah mentioned rumble strips. Are these required in particular areas?
I don't know that, so in my perspective, it's going to be, again, MnDOT trunk highways, so county roads are going to be different, but I don't know that we necessarily require them, but whenever a district is doing a pavement project, so a mill and overlay or something like that, they usually go out and evaluate whether or not rumble strips would be helpful. So they're really a really cheap and easy way to reduce run-off the road vehicle crashes, and that is one of the largest sources of transportation fatalities in Minnesota. So I know that rumble strips can be challenging for folks trying to bike on the shoulder, but in the larger system, we want them. Where places where you might sort of prioritize is if you've had some run off the road problems or curves, for example, places with lots of stuff on the side of the road, that kind of thing. Definitely, you know, we have in the manual, we have some guidance on the design of rumble strips that still make the noise, but they're like a little less jarring to bike over. And then, like I said, that gap is really important for folks to be able to get back and forth, and the placement as well. So this is one of those things where it's like, as a bicyclist, I would prefer that we not have any rumble strips anywhere, but as a transportation safety professional, I have to recognize that cars use the road too, and especially on some of our 2-lane sections, that those run off the road fatalities are, you know, a thing that we need to address.
Thanks, Hannah. We have another question, so I guess you're up back to back here. The question for Hannah, does the state have any plans to create new signage for naming trails? Follow-up questions such as destination signage or significance signage.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of information in the bike manual about bike guide signs and like a very small section about wayfinding. Generally speaking, I've learned a little bit about MnDOT's wayfinding policy. The way that the State Department of Transportation does wayfinding is we will only provide direction to a municipality. We won't provide direction to anything within the municipality, which means that your typical bike wayfinding where you've got library this way, park that way, those things are allowed on trunk highways with permission, but we won't pay for them. So we have some very high level guidance on like how to make an MUTCD compliant sign. And then it's really kind of up to the local local communities or park system or trail system or whatever to develop a system and a, you know, there are some options for sort of styles of those signs to get, you know, it's nice to have, if you have a trail network or something in your town, to have consistent signing that all has the same logo and everything on it. And so there is some MUTCD guidance on that. But we stay pretty high, as a department, we stay pretty high level with that stuff.
Thanks, Hannah. Patrick, did you want to piggyback on that at all about any specific signage related issues, if you will, that are getting pulled into the planning process for Pelican Rapids, or any discussion that you guys have had? Is there anything related to that you wanted to speak to?
Well, one thing is that last year during the 59 and 108 process, one of the comments that came through loud and clear from a number of people in the community is they want more painted crosswalks, not just across 59 and 108, but other places. And very often painted crosswalks are accompanied by signs. So I think we're certainly going to see, I mean, if that comes to fruition, and I hope it does, we're certainly going to see more crosswalk signs. There's also, and we didn't even have time for me to get into all of this, but there are a number of trail initiatives happening in Pelican Rapids, including the selection and design of a trailhead site for the Pelican Rapids to Perm Trail. And also, ultimately, we want to hook up Pelican Rapids to Detroit Lakes so they can plug into the Heartland Trail. And so there's certainly going to be a lot of wayfinding signage involved with that. We have not yet dived into the weeds on all of that, but yeah, signage is going to be a major part of the discussion.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, I'll just go ahead and see if there's any other questions here in the chat box. Also, there might be people joining by phone, and if you are either joining by phone or computer and are just on audio, I'll pause for a moment and see if anyone else would like to go off of mute and ask a question. And this could be for Hannah, or it could be for Patrick, or in general, one of the purposes of this leadership network is to take these ideas and these strategies and see how we might make them statewide and bring them to your own community. So as you're internalizing what the presenters have said today, how does this apply to you? How does it apply to your work as either a planner or a partner with people who are doing plans and designing roads? It could be local engineers or other folks in your local community. So, I'm wondering if people on the webinar today have heard about the Bicycle Facilities Design Manual, and if you have you used any components of it in your community? If you'd like to answer in the chat box, maybe we'll just open it up for a couple of round table questions for the group here. The other question you might think about is, I know there's a few folks on here from West Central Minnesota. If you are part of the Pelican Rapids planning process, these are the two trunk highway projects or the larger concept plan. Have you participated, and in what capacity, if you did participate in that planning process? Feel free to mention something in the chat box, or feel free to go off mute and then share if you'd like. It sounds like we have one person here in the chat box that's this first time hearing about the Bicycle Facility Design Manual. So thanks for joining, and I hope that you were able to click on the link and can look in a little bit more detail about that if you're interested.
That's good. I see some names on here of folks that I think have heard me talk about it at least twice. So to know that we still have some new audience for that. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's hopefully those folks are not identifying as people that haven't seen it before, and they're paying close attention to all of your points. So it's good to hear. Sometimes we do need to hear some of these really heavy things that are heavy into the design and have lots of components to them a couple of times. And as we hear this again, we might think of it a little bit more deeply and a little bit more integrated into what we might be able to apply to our local work across Minnesota. So thank you. And I see Wayne shared something in the chat box here. He's part of the Bikeable Community Workshop and on the planning committee. So thank you, Wayne, for your service in West Central Minnesota as well. So I think I will go ahead and close out the webinar today. I appreciate everyone being on the call today. Thank you for participating. And I greatly appreciate the presentations from Dorian and Hannah and Patrick today. It's excellent information. As Dorian mentioned, if you have additional questions for BikeMN, you can go to your email and send an email to info@bikemn.org. And then each of our presenters today also shared their contact information in the master slide deck that will be available to you via YouTube link shortly following the webinar, which we'll share. One thing I just want to close with is that many of you have joined today because you're part of our Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network listserv. We have a listserv on Google, and then we also reach out to the local community members who are connected with us in one way, shape, or form in the Spotlight community, which today was Pelican Rapids. So as we move around the state to spotlight different communities each month during these network webinars, then we're doing some specific outreach within those communities as well. And you may not necessarily be on our listserv if you do receive that specific communication. So know that if you'd like to connect with BikeMN through our network webinars and our leadership network through our listserv, definitely go to bikemn.org and request to join that group as a member. And then you can click in and link with us on these monthly webinars. So thank you everyone for joining today. That closes the webinar, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.